There is a mistake almost everyone makes at the beginning, though very few recognize it as a mistake. It feels intelligent, even efficient. It tells you to move faster, to skip what seems obvious, to reach for mastery without submitting to its foundation. And because this voice sounds like confidence, most people obey it without question. What they do not realize is that this single decision quietly ensures they will never go as far as they believe they can. In the discipline of ancient Japan, there is a path called Shuhari. It is not a philosophy meant to inspire, but a structure meant to shape. It describes 3 stages of mastery, yet only one determines whether the others will ever be reached. The first stage is Shu, to follow, to obey, to repeat exactly as instructed, without alteration. It is here that the ego is confronted, and it is here that most people begin to resist. Even the legendary swordsman Miyamoto Musashi did not begin with freedom. He began with discipline so rigid it allowed no room for interpretation. Before he developed his own style, before he became a symbol of mastery, he submitted himself to structure. Not because he lacked creativity, but because he understood that true expression is built upon perfect form. Chapter 1. The Quiet Overconfidence. There is a young man named Ren. He is observant, thoughtful, and ambitious in a way that appears controlled. He studies those who have come before him and believes he sees the pattern. To him, success does not seem mysterious. It seems repeatable, almost predictable. And from this belief, a quiet overconfidence begins to form. When Ren begins his training, he listens carefully, but not completely. His mind is active, constantly analyzing, constantly adjusting. When shown a technique, he follows it once, perhaps twice, and then begins to modify it, not out of defiance, but out of certainty that he understands its purpose already. In his mind, repetition feels unnecessary. This is where the fracture begins, not in action, but in perception. Ren believes he is advancing, but in truth, he is separating himself from the path. What he calls efficiency is simply impatience disguised as intelligence.
Chapter 2. The Resistance to Simplicity. The training is simple. The same movements, repeated with precision. The same steps practiced without variation. To an undisciplined mind, this simplicity feels almost insulting. Ren begins to feel it as a kind of limitation, as though he is being held back from something greater. But simplicity is not a limitation, it is a filter. It removes everything that is unnecessary, leaving only what is essential. The samurai followed this principle, not because it was easy, but because it was unforgiving. Every mistake becomes visible when there is nothing to hide behind. Ren does not yet understand this. He seeks complexity too early. He adds where he should subtract. And in doing so, he builds on an unstable foundation, unaware that what he is constructing cannot endure. Chapter 3. The Unseen Failure. Time passes and Ren continues his approach. On the surface, he appears to improve. His movements become faster, more confident. But beneath that confidence, there is inconsistency. Small errors repeat themselves, unnoticed by him, but clear to those who have walked the path before. One day, his instructor watches in silence. There is no correction, no interruption, only observation. After the session, the instructor performs the same movement Ren has practiced for weeks. It is slower, quieter, yet undeniably more complete. For the first time, Ren feels something unfamiliar, not confusion, but doubt. The gap between what he believed and what he sees cannot be ignored. It is not a gap of talent, it is a gap of discipline. Chapter 4. The Nature of Shu. Shu is often misunderstood as blind obedience, but it is not blind, it is precise. It demands attention to detail so exact that nothing is left to assumption. Every movement is repeated not to reinforce habit, but to eliminate error. In the code of Bushido, discipline was not optional. It was the foundation of identity. A warrior was not defined by moments of intensity, but by consistency in the smallest actions. This is what Ren begins to confront. Not the difficulty of the task, but the discipline required to remain within it. To follow without deviation is not easy. It requires the removal of ego, the acceptance of limitation, and the willingness to appear ordinary for a long time. Most people cannot endure this. They seek progress they can see, rather than progress that transforms them. Chapter 5. The Turning Point. Ren returns the next day with a different awareness, not yet discipline, but the beginning of it. He repeats the same movement, but this time he resists the urge to change it. The urge is still there, persistent and subtle. It tells him that he has already understood enough. But for the first time, he does not listen. This is where Shu begins, not in the repetition itself, but in the refusal to escape it. Ren slows down. He observes more carefully. Details he once ignored begin to reveal themselves. The angle of his stance, the timing of his breath, the tension in his shoulders. What once felt simple now feels precise, and within that precision, something shifts. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Staying. Days become weeks, and the structure does not change. What changes is Ren's relationship to it. The boredom he once felt transforms into resistance of a different kind. It no longer pushes him away, it tests whether he will remain. He builds a system, not of motivation, but of action. Each day, the same practice. No negotiation, no variation. It is no longer about improvement, it is about consistency. The act itself becomes the objective. This is where most people fail. Not because the path is difficult, but because it is repetitive. They mistake repetition for stagnation, not realizing that repetition is the process through which refinement occurs. Ren begins to understand that mastery is not a result of intensity, it is the result of removing the need for choice. Chapter 7. The Erosion of Noise. As the days extend into months, something subtle begins to disappear. It is not the difficulty of the practice, nor the structure that once felt restrictive. What begins to erode is the noise within Ren's mind, the constant analysis, the quiet urge to improve prematurely, the need to feel progress. All of it starts to lose its influence. In its place, a different quality emerges: presence. Not forced, not pursued, but revealed through repetition. Each movement is no longer a task to complete, but a moment to fully occupy. Ren is no longer thinking about the technique as much as he is becoming aligned with it. This is the hidden function of Shu. It does not merely teach you what to do, it removes what interferes with doing it correctly. The excess fades, and what remains is something cleaner, more direct. Not impressive, but exact. Chapter 8. The body begins to understand. There comes a point where Ren notices a change he cannot fully explain. His movements feel different, not because he's trying to improve them, but because they no longer require the same effort. The technique begins to exist without conscious force. This is not mastery, it is familiarity at a deeper level. The body, through repetition, begins to understand what the mind once tried to control. The gap between thought and action narrows. There is less hesitation, less correction, less unnecessary motion. The samurai trained for this not because it looked refined, but because it was reliable. In moments of pressure, there is no time for thought, only what has been fully absorbed will remain. Ren begins to see that Shu is not preparation for performance, it is preparation for reality. Chapter 9. The Threshold of Ha. Eventually, a quiet transition approaches. It is not announced, and it does not feel dramatic, but it is there. Ren begins to sense where slight adjustments could exist, where variation might emerge. But this time, the impulse feels different. It is no longer driven by impatience. It is grounded in understanding. This is the edge of Ha, the stage where form begins to loosen, where the practitioner starts to explore beyond strict imitation. But what makes this stage possible is not creativity alone. It is the depth of discipline that came before it. Most people reach for this stage too early,
They mistake deviation for progress. They believe that breaking form is a sign of advancement, when in reality, it is often a sign of incomplete learning. Without the foundation of Shu, there is nothing stable to expand from. Ren does not rush this transition. He continues to repeat, to refine, to observe, because now he understands that freedom is not something you take. It is something you are given by the depth of your discipline. Chapter 10. The Identity Shift. There is a transformation that occurs beyond technique. It is not visible in movement alone. It is visible in how Ren carries himself outside of training. His actions become more deliberate. His speech becomes more measured. His attention sharpens. The discipline of repetition begins to extend into everything he does. Small actions are no longer treated as insignificant. They are approached with the same precision as the techniques he practices daily. This is where the philosophy of Zen reveals itself, not as an idea, but as a way of being. Ren is no longer someone trying to improve. He is someone who follows through. The difference is quiet, but absolute. Improvement is no longer his focus. Alignment is. Chapter 11. Why most turn back. At this stage, it becomes clear why so many never progress. It is not because they lack intelligence or ability. It is because they refuse to remain within the structure long enough for it to transform them. They seek visible progress, immediate results, constant variation. And when those things are absent, they assume something is wrong. So they change methods, adjust systems, search for something more stimulating. But the path has never required stimulation. It has always required discipline. The first stage filters out those who are unwilling to surrender their need for control. It demands obedience, not as submission, but as preparation. And those who resist it remain trapped in a cycle of starting and stopping, never fully building anything that lasts. Conclusion. The stage you cannot escape. There is no path around the first stage. You can ignore it, delay it, pretend to move beyond it, but eventually you will be forced to return. Because without it, nothing you build will hold. Shu is not simply the beginning of mastery. It is the foundation of it. It teaches you to follow before you lead, to refine before you expand, to endure before you express. The samurai understood that discipline is not something you apply when it is convenient. It is something you become through repetition, through structure, through the quiet decision to remain when leaving would be easier. You cannot skip the first stage because it is not something separate from mastery. It is the part of mastery that most people refuse to accept. And so the path remains unchanged, waiting not for those who are ready to advance, but for those who are willing to begin and to remain where it matters most.
This channel is for those who wants to build discipline quietly. If that's you, hit the subscribe button.